All right, we're a few minutes after 5:30, so I think we should probably get started. We have some more folks who are registered for our session this evening, so there may be additional people hopping on through our time here. But why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days and into the evening hours to join us tonight. My name is Elizabeth Murphy, and I work with the city's planning office. And we are working with some partners at Highland Planning and the Clementine Gold Group to do community outreach around two sites, city-owned sites that were previously planned for new RPD section offices and NSC offices. And our session tonight is really focused around one of those sites, which is on East Main Street at Laura Street, kind of near Goodman, North Goodman. So we're here to do a brief overview with some background history on the project that was planned, and hear your questions and any comments that you may have. So we'll be turning it over to our colleagues at Highland and Clementine Gold to go through the presentation. But first, let's do a couple introductions. I'm going to throw it over to my colleague at the city's planning office, Kevin Kelly, who's here with me to, we'll be doing our best to answer questions that you all submit tonight around the background on these sites. So Kevin.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. My name's Kevin. Great to be with you tonight, part of the Office of City Planning and working with Highland and Clementine here. And just looking forward to learning from each other tonight. We hope that the information and the presentation is helpful for all of you to sort of understand some history and context here. And then we're really hoping to get some really good local insight and thoughts about what you think should happen at these sites in the future. So looking forward to the conversation tonight.
And I'm Andre. I am working with Highland Planning, and my job here is to listen, be a good listener, and hear what you guys have to say, and try to gather feedback and input from the public and be able to pass that on to the city. And this meeting specifically is to sort of give you guys the context, do a presentation here. So I'm looking forward to it. And Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Levere, and I am with Clementine Gold Group, and we are just working with Highland Planning to just, hear more about what you all have to say about the future development.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a couple other people trickling in. So I'm going to be presenting for a little while. Before I get into that, let me just tell you how this whole thing is going to work. Basically, I'm going to do a presentation. Some of you may have already seen some of this material. It is the same packet and presentation that we bring to the pop-ups. It is the same packet that is on the website, trying to keep everything consistent. And we are going to just go through that and make sure that you understand sort of the background. And then after that, we are going to do a Q&A. All of you should be able to see a Q&A button where you're able to submit questions. So if you click that, you can submit questions. We'll see those. I will read those aloud to the group so everyone can hear, and we can discuss those and then move to the next question. And we will be here either until our time runs out or until our questions run out. So whichever comes first. So keep in mind that today is a chance for you to understand some context. Today is a chance for you to get your questions answered. The best way to provide input is still the survey. We are going to record all these things. We are going to put those all into, they're all going to be incorporated into sort of our final report of how people are feeling and thinking about these projects. But we still do want you to get online, do the survey, share the survey with other people. Do take a chance to do that if you haven't already. Hopefully several of you already have. I'm going to go ahead and put the survey link into the chat field, so everyone should be able to see it. But if you are, for instance, joining on a phone or something like that, or if you're not sure exactly how to use the chat field and Zoom and stuff like that, you can always just go to cityofrochester.gov/Lake Ave East Main Sites, or just go to cityofrochester.gov and search Lake Ave, East Main sites, and you should be able to find the webpage, and on there you're able to link to the survey. So I definitely encourage everyone to go ahead and fill that out. Okay, so let's talk about some context here. Again, we're going to be getting to Q&A at the end of the presentation, but if something comes up while I'm presenting and you're like, oh, I don't understand that, go ahead and just drop the question right into the Q&A, and that way we can talk about that. Those will all be saved up until we finish the presentation. Okay, so how did this whole thing start? Basically, before 2015, the city of Rochester RPD sections were East Section and West Section, East Side Patrol and West Side Patrol. Because of that, officers could be working anywhere on either side of the city, depending on which patrol they were in. And in 2015, Mayor Warren, shortly after her election, asked them to move towards a community policing model. So part of that community policing model was moving to smaller sections, each with smaller neighborhood beats. The idea was that officers would be able to be in the same neighborhood often, rather than having a larger area. They would be in the same neighborhood, they would patrol that neighborhood regularly, and they would get to know that neighborhood, get to know that community and those people better. So in order to do that, they split it into these 5 sections that you can see on the map here on the side of the screen. The Lake, Clinton, Goodman, Central, and Genesee sections. Now, you can see that there are 3 green dots here. Those 3 green dots are the 3 existing RPD offices. So there was one in Central, there was one in the Clinton section, and there was one here at the north end of the Genesee section. But the Lake section and the Goodman section did not have their own offices. So as part of the reorganization to kind of fully implement it, the idea was to construct 2 new RPD offices, one for the Goodman section and one for the Lake section. Currently, officers who are working in the Goodman section begin their shifts at the Clinton station and drive over into the Goodman section. And currently, officers who are working in the Lake section start at the Genesee office and drive up north into the Lake section. So from that was in 2015 that decision was made and that whole process began. So from about 2016 to 2018, the city started a needs assessment to understand what were the needs of the RPD and what sort of things would they need from new facilities. And they looked at a bunch of different options to try to find a good spot to put these sites, to put these new offices. They looked at building new things. They looked at rehabbing existing things. They looked at leasing facilities. So they looked at lots of different options. They had a process that they went through to understand how each of those options aligned with what the different needs were for RPD. And also around that time, they started thinking about the neighborhood service centers. The neighborhood service centers were both for the Goodman section, or neighborhood service center for the Southeast and for the Northwest, which align approximately with the Goodman and Lake sections. Their facilities were sort of restrictive. They weren't able to do all the things they would like to do. For instance, they didn't have enough meeting space to have some of the community meetings they would like to hold. And so the idea was to incorporate those into these sites. And so to have co-location of the RPD offices and then neighborhood service center offices. And so they incorporated those criteria into it as well. And they eventually came up with 2 specific sites, one on East Main and one on Lake Ave. So the Lake Ave one is right here. You can see it on the corner of Lake Ave and West Ridge Road. Long-term Rochesterians might know that as the Peeler Pontiac site. So that was the one that was proposed for the Lake section office. And then for the Goodman section office, it was proposed to use this site on East Main, which consisted of half of it is, or a little less than half of it is a contaminated site, or a formerly contaminated brownfield site that the city already owned and was cleaning up. And then part of it was Laura Street next to that site, part of Laura Street and some houses there. were going to be, that site was going to be used for this new construction. So after locating those sites, the city had a couple public meetings to kind of basically to do a couple things. One, to announce that they had selected these sites. Two, to get people's sense of how they felt about the idea of having the new police offices on those sites. And also to specifically for the east section, specifically to the east section, or sorry, the Goodman section one, there were some houses on Laura Street that were going to be taken and demolished. And so there was people at the public meeting specifically talking about how the relocation of that section of those residents would work, how that all would work out. And so we had discussions about all those things at those meetings. And in general, we heard positive feedback. People were interested. They thought these were good locations for these sites, or good locations for these offices. And so the city began to move forward with planning. Now, the planning for the East Main site moved forward more quickly because the brownfield had already been cleaned up. And they were able to acquire the Laura Street properties. And so that moved forward rather quickly. And they were able to have 5 more public meetings about things relating to specific elements of the design of the site and building and things like that. And the site was pretty close to ready for construction. Or sorry, the site was ready for construction. The Lake Ave site was a little farther behind. There are still some environmental cleanup things in progress with the Lake Ave site. And so they are farther back in the design process than the East Main site. And so there's still some things that need to be done with site acquisition and stuff like that. So that was not ready for construction in August. So this all goes back to August 2020. And August 2020, because the East Main site was ready for construction, they had had their additional public meetings. They had already talked about what it's going to look like. They have done the final designs. The city council approved funding to construct that new office on East Main. So here's just an example. You can see this is a preliminary image of what something might have looked like at the Lake Ave site. Again, because of some of those environmental issues and things like that, it was a little, it wasn't as far along. So this is just a very preliminary thing. We can see that there's a building here at the southern end and parking to the north. And this is a final concept. So again, this is much farther on of what the RPD section office and the neighborhood service center at East Main was planned to look like. You can see that there are several entries. There is a public entry for the neighborhood service center, and then there is a public entry for the RPD, and they are separate entrances. There's also a separate entrance for officers in the back, and there is a community meeting room right at the front. There's also a separate parking lot for the public and parking lot for the RPD officers, and another one for their patrol cars. So this is sort of what it was designed to look like. You can see it a little better from this rendering. Again, renderings are never perfect, but you can get a sense of what it was planned to look like. This blue piece of the building right at the front was the community meeting space. Again, we had, there was some question, there's a need expressed by the neighborhood service centers for more meeting space. And so that was really a primary thing they wanted to make a highlight. So this is also, you can see that there is bike lane and stuff here. This was also kind of planned at the same time as some of the changes that they're planning to make to East Main Street, which there is under construction right now. So that was in August of 2020, of last year. In September of 2020, City Council repealed its funding approval that it had approved in August after learning about the death of Daniel Prude. There was lots of protests going on, and so after that repeal, not just was that funding repealed, but the city also then made the choice to sort of freeze the process and wait and see, put everything on hold and see how public sentiment evolved from there. So currently the officers, again, are working out of, the officers for the Goodman section are working out of the Clinton office, and for the Lake section are working out of the Genesee office. The Southeast Neighborhood Service Center is still working out of its office that is right next to the Village Gate. And the Northwest Neighborhood Service Center has actually moved to a temporary space over on Dewey. So there's a couple different options for how this all might move forward. One option is the city moves forward to implement the previous plan. Again, East Main was very close to construction. Lake Ave could continue in that process. If that were to happen, they would have to put East Main out for bid again, get a company to construct it. They would have to then, again, they had 5 public meetings about the East Main project. They'd have to go back and have similar public meetings for the Lake Ave project, because that was so farther behind and the design hadn't really been finalized yet. And they would have to finish the construction cleanup work on the Lake Ave site. So that could move forward if that is one option. Another option is to modify the previous plan and sort of build facilities with a different mix of city services, because there are several other city offices or city departments that could use services, or that could offer services at a site like this. Some discussion over whether the Department of Recreation and Human Services, which also includes animal services, could have functions there, whether or not there could be things with, for instance, the county and sort of incorporating different services, access to different services at these sites, sort of in a mini city hall sort of concept, so that you could access some of these in your neighborhood. And that may or may not include RPD and may or may not include different amounts of RPD. If it was determined not to include the RPD section offices at those sites, then they would continue to operate out of their existing facilities the way that they are currently. There are also 2 other options that are less likely. There's still possibilities, but they're less likely, and they're not really what we're hoping for, I guess. One is no action is taken. I guess if there's still a lot of indecision around something like this, that these sites could just remain empty. These sites have been empty for years. Again, they were both contaminated, so we don't want to leave the city cleaned up these sites, because it's not great for a community just to have empty sites lying there. So their community has expressed they want something to happen with these sites. So that's definitely an option that we want to avoid, is just leaving these sites vacant. But if there's no solid decision at some point, then that's what's likely for these sites, because they are contaminated or they were contaminated, and they may take some work. Related to that, it is possible that the city could sell these sites, put out an RFP, sell these to a developer, put another thing on the tax rolls. If they did that, there would be, again, some restrictions due to previous contamination and things like that. You wouldn't be, not all locations on each of these sites are suitable for residential development, for instance. You just wouldn't be able to put residential development there with the contamination as it is. But maybe something commercial or industrial could go onto these sites. That would be bringing them back onto the city tax rolls, but that may or may not be the best thing for the community, and that would not give us the opportunity to build a city facility to benefit the community. So those are 2 options that are less likely, but they are kind of on the table. So that's basically the overview of what's going on. After all that, we are coming back around. We are asking the public, how do you feel about these sites? What are your ideas? What are your questions? All of this is going to get wrapped up into a report that is going to go back to the city, so they can kind of have a record, a snapshot of how people are feeling about these sites at this time. And then they can incorporate that into any future decisions that might be made about these sites. So this isn't, at this point, we aren't making the decision. This isn't like a referendum process or something, where if a certain number of people say yes or no on the survey, if something's going to happen, there's no decision tied to those surveys or anything like that. This is going to be a snapshot that we pass on, so that when they move forward to make future decisions, they know how people were feeling, what people's opinions are on how these sites should be used. So now we're going to move over into the Q&A. I see that we have a couple that started coming in. Before we move into the Q&A, Elizabeth or Kevin, is there anything that I didn't cover in the presentation that you feel like you would like to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's a good overview, yeah. And then we can get into some more details as people have, their questions submitted.
All right, so I'm looking at the Q&A here. All right, we have a question here from Marcia Reaver, who's asking, the downtown section has already been combined with the southwest section. I anticipate the new mayor will have his own agenda. What happens if these new stations, if we go back to 2 sections? So,
Yep.
Elizabeth, you want to?
So I think Marcia's bringing up a good point that there will be a new administration coming in the new year, and we don't know at this point what if they have differing plans, the same plan. We don't know that information now. And where we're at now with these 2 sites is that currently there is no plan to move forward. So what we're trying to do right now is more, come back. It's been a year since the funding was revoked for the Goodman section and Southeast Service Center facilities, and check in and see what community members are thinking now about whether they would like to see these sites or not. And we'll be writing up all of that information into a summary report to share with leadership, both the current administration, who's with us, through the end of the year, and for the new administration, for them to use as they think through, what their priorities and ideas are going to be about how to move forward.
I just want to add, Marcia, your question was what happens to these new stations if we go back to 2 sections, and related to the new mayor and stuff like that. But I think that, again, as I mentioned, there's still a process here. Even if we decided tomorrow, which is not going to happen, even if we decided tomorrow, oh, we're just going to move forward, it'd still be a bidding process to figure out who's going to build the new East Main site. There'd still be lots of design to happen. So it's not like this is going to happen next week, and then we'll have these sites and then maybe something will change. We're still kind of early on in this process. So I don't anticipate that being a real issue if all of a sudden something changing and these already have been constructed, because there's still going to be a while before any of that happens.
Yeah, and for the lake, I mean, tonight's meeting is really more focused on the East Main Street site, and that was much further along in terms of design and its readiness to move forward for the facility to be built. But as Andre said, even if a decision were to be made this fall, which there is no decision on the table right now, but if for some reason we were to try to move that forward this fall, there's a number of things that would need to be kind of figured out before we'd be able to do that. So at this point, I just want to emphasize there is no plan to move forward or not. These facilities are on pause, and so we're just trying to check in and see what people want, and particularly residents right around these 2 areas that would have the closest proximity and access to the services that were planned for them. We want to better understand what your questions, your interests, your concerns, and there's wide range of opinion across the community about whether these should be built or not.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually skip down to the end, a follow-up question from Marcia as well. She's asking, why are we moving forward with anything until the administration changes? Again, we're not moving forward with anything.
So we're not moving forward with anything. We're in a holding pattern. We're on pause. Funding was revoked for the East Main Street site. And we are just checking back in now that it's a year later to see, you know, take the compass, take the pulse of the community and see what people would like to see happen. If there's a desire to move forward, if there's a desire to not move forward, if there's a desire to move forward, as Andre was explaining, in a somewhat modified way, you know, with an addition of other city services. That's really all we're doing is kind of taking a community pulse on what people would like to see.
Thanks. We have another question here, a question from Judy Hay, asking, in 2020, there were federal funds attached to the project. Is that funding still available?
That's a good question. I don't know the direct answer to that question. I know that when legislation was brought to council to, you know, to authorize, you know, part of it is they were going out to issue bonds, and then there were a number of other sources that were being combined as well to finance the development of that facility. And I am not sure the current status for several of those. And I think if at some point in the future a decision were to be made to move forward for that particular facility, you know, my understanding is that the facility design and specs and all of that is sort of ready to go. We'd have to go out to bid again. But because it's been a year and because some things have changed, you know, certainly around in terms of construction costs and materials, the project costs may have changed in the interim as well. I don't know that for a fact. That's just me guessing. But I would imagine that we'd have to, you know, reassess the full range of funding sources that would be needed to fund it at this point and what the current estimated cost would be. And we would have to look at that source of funding, that federal source. And then there were several other, I think there were 3 or 4 other sources in addition to the bonds that were going to be used to pay for the construction. So we'd have to assess whether those are still available or whether there are other sources out there that could be used to fund it.
Thanks. We have a question. It's more of a suggestion from an anonymous attendee saying that we need more low-income housing. They say for every 100 people in Rochester needing low-income housing, we have 35 units available. This would be a good use of these properties. The portion of the land that was not contaminated could serve that purpose. Again, these sites are primarily suitable for commercial or industrial development. The west of Laura Street, there might be some that you could, or sorry, east of Laura Street.
Yep, east of Laura.
That you could use for residential. But most of this land would be primarily suitable for commercial or industrial development.
Correct.
All right, we have a question here from Deborah Miller Collins saying, since these facilities have been put on pause because of the Daniel Prude tragedy, this might seem more palatable if there were some sort of space designated toward improving police community interactions. I hear what you're saying, Deborah, although I have a quick question. Maybe you can add another question to Q&A to follow up. When you say a space designated, do you mean a physical space like on these sites designated toward improving police community interactions, or do you mean a sort of some sort of forum designed toward improving police community interactions? I wasn't not sure exactly which of those you mean. As far as if there was a space designated toward a physical space at these sites designated toward improving police community interactions, there is some of that going on at the current neighborhood service centers. At the current neighborhood service centers, they do have the crime prevention officers. And so they would still be in these new sites if they were to be constructed. And their job is to do exactly that, improve police community interactions. I don't know whether, it's not clear what difference having this site would make in their work, but some of that work is happening at some of the neighborhood service centers. Elizabeth, Kevin, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think that, I mean, was it Deborah who provided this comment? Yeah, I'd encourage you, Deborah, to just share a little bit more in the Q&A or in the chat of what you're thinking, and we would accept it as a comment. And thanks for sharing your input.
Yeah, and I'll just add that certainly it's a goal of the Warren administration to continue to try to improve police community relations. It's obviously, as everyone here knows, it's a very, very complex issue, and sometimes things work and sometimes things don't go well, and we acknowledge that, to put it mildly. But it is our hope and is our goal, and I would imagine, you know, in the likely scenario that Malik Evans is the next mayor, I believe that he shares that objective. How you actually do that and try and improve those relations is a different question, and it's not necessarily a question for this particular project, but it is a larger question that's very valid in this community. Is how do we make some huge strides to improve those relations, because there are certainly a lot of scars, to say the least.
A quick question. I see one from Mary Coffey, who is asking who's hosting this meeting. She said there was an email sent by some anti-police groups. It says they're the hosts. I think that I just want to clarify any confusion. There are lots of different groups with interests in these sites. People advocating for community centers at these sites, people advocating for, you know, people advocating against police funding, all these other things that are related to this site. And they're sending out emails to get people to fill out the survey and to raise awareness. And everyone is allowed to do that. We encourage actually everyone to send out emails to your communities, to post on Facebook groups and let people know that this survey is open, let people know that these meetings are happening. But if you get an email from a community organization that says that this meeting is happening, that doesn't mean that they are sponsoring the meeting or that they organized the meeting. This is a city meeting, and there's just lots of community groups who are doing their jobs and trying to get people out to different city meetings. So yeah, this is a city hosted meeting. Just make sure that everyone.
Yes. And just, I also see in Mary's, maybe it's in the chat instead of the comment in the Q&A, that she's asking if decisions have already been made. And I just want to reiterate that no, there's no decision on the table and no decision has been made. All of the work that was going into these sites is on pause for now because City Council revoked funding to move forward with the construction of the facility on East Main Street. So we're really just here to check in to see what people think, to hear their questions and do our best to answer them, and to receive their input and summarize that to bring to leadership, to inform a future decision about how to move, if and how to move forward.
Deborah clarified her question. She was speaking about physical space in the building for increasing the connections between the police and the community. So yes, we'll definitely record that comment and put that in.
Great.
We have a question here, another one from Judy, asking if the Department of Recreation and Human Services is co-located with RPD and Southeast Neighborhood Service Center, will there be a mental health component such as a PIC team? Now,
so yeah, I want to clarify that there are no plans to move forward in any particular way, but what we have raised, I think, through the survey and through these input opportunities is we want to understand what kinds of city services people think are most important and most beneficial to locate in neighborhoods, as opposed to primarily as opposed to City Hall, because for a lot of people, that's not as convenient to access some city services. But of course, we provide city services at our centers and, in other facilities as well. So, so there's no plan to add in Department of Recreation and Human Services components with these facilities in a formal way. But we do understand that as the Department of Recreation and Human Services is evolving in their role, they provide a variety of services, many of which are already provided in community settings, through our centers and athletic facilities and parks. But there may be some of their youth development and other human services and animal services that may make sense to explore co-locating in a facility like this. So I think the question that you're raising, Judy, though, yeah, we would be interested to know if people think that those are the kinds of services that would be beneficial to co-locate in a facility like this. And then we could provide that input to leadership for this administration and also moving forward. And I would say also, we did, as we were gathering some background information to get ready for these meetings, we did speak with folks in leadership at the Department of Recreation and Human Services. And I think they have an interest and a willingness to explore other community venues for them to provide services, but also some hesitancy around co-locating some of their services with police services. So some of the public safety stuff that they do, particularly working with teens and violence prevention, they thought would not be beneficial to co-locate at a facility with RPD.
So along those lines, I think it's important to make a distinction between one, whether or not the city is investing in those types of services, and two, whether or not those types of services are being co-located at these specific sites. Mm-hmm. So the answer to the first question is yes, the city is, between the PIC team and some other efforts, the city is and the county are looking to invest in those services that, as we all, I think, would like to see, could substitute for a police presence responding to certain situations. So there is an investment in those types of services. But then the second question is whether or not they would go at these more of these sites. And and I think that's what Elizabeth is speaking to. There is the possibility for some of it, but then there's some other specific services that might not be appropriate to be located there, but we would still be investing in those services at some other location.
Thanks, Kevin. We have another question here. First question from Kathy Rivers, asking, has a Center for Mental Health and Transformative Justice been considered in honor of Daniel Prude to help us avoid similar tragedies? The short answer is no. That's not on the list of things that are considered right now. But as Kevin mentioned, things like the PIC team, in relation to mental health are being worked on by the city and county through different locations. But this is, again, an idea that will be recorded and that we'll have listed down there. It's not something that's already on our list. So thanks for adding it. Let's see, we've answered 9 questions here. I don't have any open questions at the moment. So if you are one of our 15 participants, I'd appreciate it if you have any questions, if you go ahead and drop those in the Q&A field. We'd love to answer those. We have still some more time. Like I said, we'll be here until the questions run out or the time runs out. Please do put some more of those questions down. Also, if you had any questions related to the presentation, you can go ahead and open those up as well, because we'd love to hear what you have to say.
And Andre, for the sake of, I think a couple of people might have joined sort of midstream here. Do you mind dropping the survey link in the chat again?
Yes.
And that's, and then also, could you mention the other opportunities for folks to, other meetings that are happening and other opportunities for folks to sort of stay up to speed and provide comments on this?
Mm-hmm. I can do that. Just a moment, I'm going to go like this. So everyone should be able to see here, this is the web page for the Lake Ave East Main sites for this project. Again, it's cityofrochester.gov/Lake Ave East Main sites. Please do go ahead and visit that if you want to see some additional information. Note that we have 2 meetings virtual and 2 meetings in person. So this is the second meeting about the East Main site. So this is the virtual meeting. We already had one on September 2nd over at the Ryan Center. Again, if you live in the Goodman section and you really want to give your input, if you show up at the Edgerton Center, Edgerton R Center at the Lake Ave site, I'll still take your input. So it's not locked out. You can still give input on either site at either of these meetings, but we just want to make sure that we have a focus on a particular site and we're able to have a meeting close to that site. So we do have some more meetings coming up. On the 16th, we have another in-person meeting at the Edgerton R Center about the Lake Ave site. And then we have on September 21st, the Zoom meeting similar to this one for the Lake Ave site. There's also, as Kevin mentioned, I just dropped in the chat the link to the survey. The survey is going to be open till the end of the month, till like the first week of October. So we would love to hear your comments that way. And again, we would love for you to share that around, put that on Facebook, put that on your email lists, because we want to make sure we can get as much feedback as we can, so that when we wrap this all up into a report that will go to leadership, so that they kind of have that snapshot of how people are feeling, that we have good, rich feedback for that. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions at the moment. Karen put into the question field, thanks for this informative meeting. You're welcome, Karen. Please do fill out our survey. We have one more question here. Kathy Rivers is asking, can the architectural building plans of any planned buildings considered for these sites be made public? I know that the conceptual designs are probably on the website. I know that they are in this presentation, which is on the website. I don't know about the exact architectural drawings, but that's probably not what you mean.
I think so they're called a final concept rendering for the building and for the site plan for the facility at East Main. And they're included in the presentation that Andre just went through. They're also, there was a separate city page that was formed several years ago that's about the RPD reorganization, and where you can find presentations and information from the reorganization process and the community meetings that took place in the past that led to that final design concept. I'm pretty sure that it's at that website as well, which I'll go to and drop here in the chat as well. But very detailed, to spec, final plans. I think that doesn't happen until you're in the bidding process and a firm, is selected to move forward and you're into that process. So because the funding was revoked by City Council and we didn't complete the bid process, we don't have the more detailed drawings yet, just the final, the concept designs and those specs.
And I just want to note also that those designs and concepts were public. They were made public. There were public meetings about those designs and concepts. And that no matter what happens on these sites. There will be additional public meetings with public drawings about whatever happens on these sites, because that's just how the process always works. So
Yeah, and for East Main, you know, which was further along in the process, the design concepts for the building itself and for the site plan, you know, the layout of the site over the land, was refined over time in response to public input and community meetings during gosh, I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I think it was 6 months or a year-long process where there was a series of additional community meetings that were held to inform that design and final concept.
Yeah. Another question from Karen here asking if there will be any green initiatives incorporated in new buildings. If I remember correctly, the design for the East Main site did have some green functions and maybe some funding attached, some green green infrastructure.
Yes. There was a water quality improvement program that funds from New York State, maybe from the DEC that were part of it. And so yes, there were, I'm not aware of the specifics, but I think some, yeah, green and landscaping elements were part of that design.
Yeah.
And we do, I think in general, you know, when the city is involved, and certainly for city facilities, we do try to include, you know, green building practices and elements in city facilities where possible.
Yeah. Again, you can go back to the city webpage for the RPD reorganization and city webpage. There might be a separate city webpage for that site in particular, where you can kind of see sort of that process and the run up to all of that. Again, all of that has been kind of on hold, so it may not exactly move forward exactly the same. We had an earlier question relating to, oh, is there going to be, is that funding all still available? Again, some of that funding was related to green elements. And so, you know, some of that stuff is all, would be in the air if things were to move forward. But definitely the city has, you know, incorporated lots of green elements in most of the construction that they've been working on lately. And also Karen asked about geothermal. I don't remember if there was geothermal specifically in that. I think it was because it was a water quality thing. It was related more to runoff and rainwater and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know about geothermal.
Yeah, and even if there wasn't, you know, things could change moving forward. And so if you feel like that's an important element to include, by all means, you know, we've got that mentioned here, but by all means, mention that in the survey as well as something that you feel is important to consider for any future building designs.
And Mary also mentions there are plans for a streetscape on that area of East Main. Yes, they're currently under construction, actually. So you can actually, there is a city webpage for that as well. And you can actually go watch them build it. I ride by it every day. So I'm personally excited for that, because that's good. That's one of my commute, one of the ways that I commute to work. But yeah, that is related to this project in that it's at the same location, but that's moving forward on its own, and it's not affected by the whole pause and all that other stuff. Kathy is asking, she says there are a lot of people who were surprised by the later designs compared to the original conceptual designs for Main Street site. Can you share those later plans? The plans that I put on the in this presentation, which is again available on the webpage for this project, are the latest ones, the ones that were closest to construction. So that I'll scroll back a little bit here so you can see it. But that's this. So this was the latest concept rendering, and this was the latest concept plan view. So that's sort of what was on the table right before everything was frozen. All right. So again, we don't have any open questions. So again, I would encourage you, if you do have questions, go ahead and put them up. It looks like a couple people have left, but thank you for attending to those people. Do we have any last questions before we begin to wrap up? Deborah, it looks like you're raising your hand. Can you, do you have a question you want to put in the Q&A field? Oh, okay. That was a mistake. She pressed that button by mistake, so that's all right. Okay, so if everyone is good, then thank you so much for attending. Again, we have several more meetings coming up. We have the 2 Lake Ave meetings, which, if you are someone who lives in the Goodman section, or someone who lives in the Goodman section, you are welcome to attend those as well. We may focus more of the things that we're talking about on Lake Ave, but if you have additional questions, you can drop those there as well. And we do encourage everyone to fill out that survey, which we put in the chat field, so that we can get lots of great feedback on this. So I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you either on the survey or at another one of our meetings.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.